It's 1884. In a grand hall in Berlin, the air is thick with cigar smoke and the sound of clinking glasses. Around a long, polished table sit men in sharp suits and military uniforms. Leaders, diplomats, and power brokers from Europe's biggest empires. They're laughing, negotiating, and drawing lines on a giant map of Africa. And here's the shocking part. Not a single African voice is present. In that room, the fate of an entire continent was decided. Borders were drawn, territories were claimed. And the people of Africa, their lives, their lands, their cultures, they were all treated like pieces of a game board. This single conference, now remembered as the Berlin Conference, carved Africa apart like a cake. And the consequences of that meeting still shape Africa and the world today. To really understand what went down in Berlin, we need to set the stage. By the late 19th century, European nations were hungry. Hungry for land, hungry for resources, hungry for power. Industrialization had created new wealth in Europe, but it also created a thirst for raw materials. Gold, diamonds, rubber, ivory. And guess where those were in abundance? Africa. But there was a problem. Africa was not just some empty land. It was home to millions of people, with powerful kingdoms, rich cultures, and complex trade networks. From the Ashanti Empire in West Africa to the Zulu Kingdom in the south, Africa was thriving in its own right. Still, to European powers, Africa represented opportunity, and with steamships and new weapons like the Maxim gun, Europe suddenly had the means to invade and conquer. This scramble for Africa was on, and it was ruthless. So in 1884, Germany's Chancellor Otto von Bismarck called for a conference in Berlin. The goal? To avoid fighting each other while dividing Africa. Imagine that the whole idea was not to protect Africa, but to make sure Europe could colonize it without stepping on each other's toes. Representatives from 14 countries showed up. Britain, France, Germany, Portugal, Belgium, Spain, Italy, and more. For 4 months, from November 1884 to February 1885, they sat around tables, debating, arguing, and ultimately deciding Africa's future. The rules they created were chillingly simple. Any European power that wanted to claim part of Africa just had to inform the others and establish some form of control. That was it. No African leaders were invited. No African voices were heard. The people who actually lived on the land were completely erased from the conversation. And so, with the stroke of pens and lines on maps, Africa was cut apart like slices of cake. The maps drawn at the Berlin Conference were brutal. Borders were created with no respect for tribes, cultures, or languages. Families were split. Enemies were forced together. Ancient kingdoms were erased overnight. Take Nigeria, for example, home to over 250 ethnic groups. Britain lumped them all into one colony. In East Africa, Germany and Britain sliced through lands that had been home to Swahili traders for centuries. In Central Africa, King Leopold of Belgium claimed the Congo as his personal property. Not Belgium's property, his. What followed there became one of the bloodiest chapters in colonial history. This was more than just a land grab. It was the beginning of a nightmare. Forced labor, brutality, and exploitation became the norm. Millions of Africans died, not only from violence, but from famine, disease, and displacement caused by European greed. But let's be clear, Africans did not sit back and accept this. Across the continent, people resisted. In Ethiopia, Emperor Menelik II fought back against Italy and won a stunning victory at the Battle of Adwa in 1896, proving Africa was not just a victim, but a fighter. In South Africa, the Zulu warriors resisted British invasions with fierce determination. In West Africa, Samurai Touré built an empire and resisted French forces for years. The Berlin Conference may have drawn the lines, but it could not erase the spirit of Africa. resistance movements sparked across the continent, and even though many were brutally crushed, they planted the seeds for future independence. But here's the haunting truth. The borders drawn in Berlin still exist today. Almost every African country you see on the map owes its shape to that conference. And those borders? They created deep problems. Ethnic groups were divided. Rival groups were forced into single nations. This laid the foundation for conflicts that still erupt today. From Nigeria's Biafra War to Rwanda's genocide to countless border disputes, the fingerprints of the Berlin Conference are everywhere. Africa's suffering during colonial rule was not an accident. It was designed in that Berlin meeting. But so was Africa's resilience. Despite everything, African nations eventually rose, fought for independence, and reclaimed their freedom. The Berlin Conference was one of the most chilling power plays in history, a moment when human lives were traded for profit and an entire continent was reshaped without consent. But it's also a reminder, history is not just about what happened in the past. Its impact is still with us today. Africa is still healing from those scars, but it is also rising, stronger than ever. So now, I'll leave you with a question. Was the Berlin Conference simply history's darkest land grab? Or is it the root of challenges Africa still faces today? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if you want to hear more untold stories of history that shaped the world we live in, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe, and share this video. Because history, no matter how painful, must never be forgotten.